Hello. Hi. And, welcome? Welcome. Yes, indeed. Um, I I probably should just quit saying it, but, I had hoped to be back sooner. These things just don't always happen how they might. That being said, it feels good to be back. I'm also happy to announce that my iMac made it safely from Puerto Rico back to the States, and yeah, it's nice to be off the laptop and back on the iMac, especially for recording. It's smoother. It doesn't have latency issues. It seems like it even sounds better, but I think I'm probably just getting a little placebo effect on that part. Anyway, with that said, yeah, let's see. Okay. Sorry. Other programming notes include snow day today. That's right. For the first time in like nearly almost 30 years, we had not just flurries, but like roughly 3 to 4 inches accumulation of the powdery white stuff falling out of the sky. It was pretty awesome. And I know some of you guys live places where it snows every winter, and you're like, yeah, fuck you and your novelty with snow and shit. But hey, that's not me. That's not my thing. So, and yeah, I lived in Atlanta for 16 years, and every 2 to 3-ish years we would have snow, something like that. And sometimes, a fair amount, even like upwards of 6 inches or something, which is still, again, for people who are actually from like, much further north, that's still just kind of like, heh, that's cute, you guys. But all the same, I haven't had to live through enough snow to hate it, and so I kind of love it. It's kind of magical. Anyway, all right. It's Harry Potter Abridged. That's what this is. And we are zooming ahead to chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which is entitled At Flourish and Blotts. I'm just going to go ahead and say off top, this is a long chapter. I mean, relatively speaking, anyway. My Kindle estimates based on, my average reading time and stuff, which has to get a little bit skewed after a while, but because I sit here with like the same page open while I'm talking, doing this for like ages. But anyway, it seems to somehow have a fairly good idea. Maybe it knows when you're doing that and it stops counting or something. I don't know. Anyway, it says that there's 38 minutes left in reading the chapters. So, well, this is abridged, right? So it's not going to be that long. We'll see how that actually plays out. Anyway, so yeah, and we'll see. Maybe we can, gloss over any of the fluff here. We'll try to just stick to the real meat of the chapter, as it were. So we start off with a description of life at the Burrow, because as we learned in the last chapter, so many moons ago, Harry was rescued by Harry was rescued by Harry. That would be amazing. Anyway, Ron, Fred, and George rescued Harry from the confines of Privet Drive and got him back to the Burrow. And so now we continue with a little discussion about life at the Burrow, which is contrasted with Privet Drive, and of course, obviously, there's everything looks different. It's not neat and orderly like the Dursleys' place. Has interesting things like the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, which that's a term that I'm not actually sure exactly what it means, because when I think mantelpiece, I think of like something that goes over a fire, and those kind of fires aren't in the kitchen but again, this is a I'm reading the British version and I don't know what it means kind of thing. So there's a few of you, so anyone who wants to chime in, feel free. Anyway, the mirror, the first time that Harry looks in it, it shouts at him to tuck in your shirt, Scruffy. So that's cute. There's mention of the ghoul in the attic. We're not going to revisit all that. By the way, thank you guys for all the the Googling that you did that I didn't. Your research and your answers were most helpful. Let's see. We find out that Fred and George's bedroom often has the explosion sounds with their experiments and such. A little precursor for the Wheezes, the Weasley's wizarding wheezes, Cool Whip. Anyway, but it's said what Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking ghoul. It was the fact that everybody seemed to like him. Aw, Harry. But for real though, I mean, like, life at Privet Drive was pretty much shit, and so he's this is just new for him, to be in a place where people actually seem to enjoy his presence, and not just his couple of friends at school, but this entire family unit, which, for all intents and purposes, becomes Harry's adoptive family. I mean, he's the closest to them as he is any family, full, complete mother, father, children, unit, family thing. Right. Speeding through. So yeah, Mrs. Weasley's, basically become like his mother. She fusses over his, clothing and stuff and makes sure he's all together. And Mr. Weasley likes to ask Harry questions about Muggle stuff. And then they get their letters from Hogwarts, and let's see. And that morning when they get their letters, Harry comes down to the kitchen with Ron, and Ginny manages to accidentally knock her porridge bowl to the floor. So we get the early precursors that Ginny has a crush on Harry, because apparently she's prone to knocking things over when Harry enters the room. And I have to suppose that Rowling had it in mind that Ginny was going to become nothing like this when she grew up a little bit more. So this is the contrast of that. Because it's hard to imagine the Ginny that Harry eventually, okay, whatever. We're spoiling. That Harry eventually is with, is nothing you can't imagine her getting nervous when somebody else walks in the room, no matter who it is, even if they're famous. So yeah, let's see. But early on, these are our little indicators. So they get their letters, and Mr. Weasley mentions that Dumbledore already knows that Harry's there because he's probably tracking him in some kind of way. Because, it's not like Harry did any magic himself to get there, so he didn't set off the trace, but, Dumbledore. Maybe there's some other way that's obvious that Harry Dumbledore would know, and I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyway, Everybody's checking out their Hogwarts letters, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and then we get the book list. And we find out that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, 7, right? But there are 7 books by Gilderoy Lockhart on the list. An as yet unseen name in this series. And then they realize that everybody's been set all of Lockhart's books on their list. Water, by the way, if you were wondering. Cottonmouth is a motherfucker. That's right. Let's see here. And and one of the twins mentions that that's going to be expensive because that's not his books aren't cheap, and that's everybody's got to get the books, and we kind of get like that reminder that Ron's family is not the most well off financially, and yet they've got a lot of kids. So there's that, but they're also a loving family, and so I think the theme is that you don't have to have a whole lot if you are loving and you take care of each other and you don't do anything particularly stupid. They live a fairly modest life. They don't do extravagant things unless they happen to win some extra money or something like that. Spoiler alert. So yeah, anyway, Mrs. Weasley's like, yeah, we'll manage. Talking about buying all the books. And they mentioned picking up a bunch of Ginny's things secondhand, which again just sort of re-emphasizes the whole, I wouldn't call the Weasleys poor. Maybe some people would. I don't actually know, but I guess I would think of them as sort of like the lower middle class. And it's not so much that Mr. Weasley's a bum either. It's just they've got a lot of fucking kids. The same couple with like 1 or 2 kids would probably be seen as like more like middle upper class, or I'm sorry, middle class, middle to upper middle class, something like that. But when you've got, let's see, how many are there again? Well, under the roof now we've got Ginny, Ron, Fred, and George, and Percy. That's 5. There were 7. Okay, I wanted to guess 7, but it's not, because Bill and Charlie rounded out. So yeah, that's a lot of mouths to feed. But hey, good on them. They're a family full of love, and also speaks to the health of the relationship between Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, that they've been able to keep at it that many years, to keep making that many children. So hey, good for them all. More Ginny doing funny stuff because she's awkward around Harry. Percy comes down. He's all dressed and ready with his prefect badge pinned to his knitted tank top. Yeah, and Percy's, all business. Morning, all. Lovely day. Oh, Percy. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, and he almost sits on Errol, their pathetic owl, who, after flying in with Hermione's letter, which they're about to find, Ron retrieves Errol and gets him out of harm's way. And so, yeah, Hermione has sent a letter to Ron because Ron wrote her about the issue with the Dursleys and not, that they were going to go rescue him and everything. So, of course, Hermione's little letter is read aloud by Ron, but it carries her tone. And I actually listened to the audiobook version of this chapter today, so I could hear Stephen Fry and kind of, excuse me, get in the mode, because that's what Stephen Fry reading Harry Potter does. It gets you in the mode, and by mode I mean mood, I think, but maybe both, perhaps zone even. Right. So of course Hermione's primary concern was that they didn't break any rules or laws or do anything illegal, which of course they did. And Hermione mentions that she's busy with schoolwork, and Ron's like, "How can she be? We're on holiday." So yeah, that's pretty much it. And they're gonna meet at Diagon Alley, in London, because that's when that's where Hermione's going to get her stuff. And so that's pretty much now when Hermione's going to be in London is now the date that the Weasleys will go into town also, because that's just neat and tidy. Let's see here. Oh, and so it's mentioned that that particular day is not the day, of course, that they're going to Diagon Alley, and so Harry, Ron, Fred, and George are going to go play some Quidditch. Well, as best they can, since they're not able to use the magical balls, up in a paddock. So the Weasleys have a little bit of land. It's not like they just have the garden surrounding the Burrow. They have a paddock. And it's a place where it's surrounded by trees, and it's above the village, so nobody can see them flying brooms and stuff. It's mentioned that Percy was asked to go, but Percy doesn't want to go because he's been apparently shut up in his room, and they're all like... And, it's funny because Fred says he's not himself. Oh, well, yeah, that's right, because he got, good grades. He got all his OWLs, and he didn't gloat, so he's, been keeping to himself. That's right. And maybe he does kind of keep to himself anyway, but he's been, extra closeted of late. So, we get the explanation of what owls are, ordinary wizarding levels. There's mention that Bill was head boy, and the twins are loathing the idea that Percy's going to be the same, which is kind of funny because Bill being head boy and Percy being head boy, about the only thing that has in common is the fact that they're both redheaded and named Weasley, because they're pretty different. Very different. Bill was just smart, but he wasn't a pompous nerd, at least not from what we can tell by how he turns out later. And we get that brief description / reminder of who Bill and Charlie are, and I'm pretty sure they were mentioned in the first book, but even more less frequently, I guess. I'm just here. I feel like I just heard a message trying to come through or something. Not that I should really be paying attention to such things. Anyway, I'm just, I don't like to be rude to people. So no, I don't see anything. I think I just imagined it. Alright, cool. Anyway. It's a slightly less focused Harry Potter Abridged, but then again, when have I ever been super on top of it? Don't answer. Boom, 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 boom. And everybody rides Harry's Nimbus 2000 because it's the cool broom, and We get a mention of Ron's broom being like so slow that it's outstripped by passing butterflies, which, again, we have to emphasize the shortcomings, not shortcomings, but the what's the right word here? Just the financial situation with the Weasley family, that they don't have the best of really anything, which, of course, again, that's sort of the point, is that they're still, relatively speaking, happy. Ron, gets frustrated with it sometimes because it's embarrassing at school to, like, wear secondhand stuff, or to, always have, like, shitty wand or not a great broom or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's more to do with the social situation. Like, Ron's actual happiness is like a whole different story. Now, granted, he's got some issues, but they're more related to the fact that he's like the sixth son in a family of 7. So anyway, they're not perfect, but they're happy in general as a family. That's my point, that I've certainly repeated by now a couple of times. Right. Okay. Yep. Bill and Charlie. Charlie's in Romania. Dragons. Reminder. Even though we do get, I forgot about that. We get the whole thing with Norbert in the first book, and so anyway, yeah. Mentions of all those books, and then all of so the Weasley children are concerned about the money thing. They don't sound disgruntled about it. They just sound concerned, because they're like, holy shit, 5 sets of Lockhart books. There's 7 books for each kid. And so, which, by the way, couldn't, like, some of them share? Like, I don't know, I guess not, but at least Fred and George are in the same year, and they're twins. Whatever. I mean, it's in the letter. I guess they have to. But, and what's up with Dumbledore, like, allowing Lockhart to require 7 fucking books per student? Like, that's a lot. And if it came down to McGonagall instead of Dumbledore, then why the fuck did McGonagall allow it? If, deputy headmistress and all, maybe she takes some of the duties, but, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, wow. And of course, Harry feels like awkward about all this, because Harry's got like more money than the Weasleys do, and he hasn't done anything for it. So he doesn't feel like money ain't changed Harry, man. And it really didn't. I mean, it made him feel better, I think, to know that he didn't have to rely on the Dursleys for anything anymore. But it's not like he thinks he's better than anybody because he's got money. In fact, he feels awkward, right now, because he's like, well, I could buy everybody's books, but they wouldn't let me. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. And so anyway, that's that little section, and there's actually like one of those switching scenes kind of deals where you get the asterisk, and so now it's the following Wednesday. We've zipped ahead, and now this is the day that they're going to go to Diagon Alley, and we find out about Floo powder, which is a way of traveling magically through fires, which, is just such a kind of silly thing, but it's like it sort of fits the whole, like, I don't know, England magic kind of thing, at least from my perspective. I mean, what the hell do I know anyway? But it's cute, and it's it kind of makes some kind of sense because everybody's got a fire. So anyway, so they have to explain it to Harry because they don't realize that he's never done it before, and of course he hasn't done it before. Like, he hasn't been part of the magical world for very long, and who the fuck's house would he have traveled by Floo powder from or to prior to this? But anyway, they just, an oversight, the Weasleys didn't realize. And actually, it's Ron that informs, because Ron's Harry's best mate, and Ron knows that he has never done it. So he's like, "Wait a minute, Harry's never done this," and they're like, "Oh." So anyway, and so they were wondering. That's right, Mr. Weasley's like, "How did you get to Hogwarts?" Or no, how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school things the first year? And Harry explains that he took the underground with Hagrid. And Mr. Weasley starts getting into wanting to ask questions about Muggle stuff, and Mrs. Weasley stops him. And then they explain Floo powder, and it's just this powder that you drop in the fire, and you say the destination of where you're going, the name of the destination that you're going to. That's a better way to say it. And then you're whisked away, and things happen, and it's kind of weird and kind of uncomfortable, and if you don't watch out, you'll do it. And so they're like trying to give Harry all these tips. It reminds me of I can't even remember if this scene exists in a Game of Thrones, but in the first season, maybe the first episode, of Game of Thrones, I think it's in the book too, I forget, where Bran's trying to shoot the bow and arrow, and like every single member of his fucking family, well, at least all the guys that are there, are like giving him a different piece of advice. And yeah, anyway, so it's like that, like when everybody's trying to tell you how to do something, but like they've all given you good advice, but too many pieces of it right back to back, and you're like, right, I'll do all of those things, except I can't remember any of them now. So Harry's trying to listen to everybody's advice, and so and so some of the other family members go ahead of him, and so and they're like even saying don't fall out of the wrong fireplace, and so anyway, Harry steps into the flames, and then as soon as he opens his mouth, before he even gets to say what he's supposed to be doing, he swallows some hot ash, so he's like all coughing like he just hit his first blunt or something. And then he coughs out Diagon Alley, but it's like doesn't sound all clear. It's get out, whatever, something like that. And then of course he still gets sent off into the Floo network, which is definitely sort of mysterious and weird, right? Like you see like stuff flying by you, and like it's like if you're going to be able to say your destination and arrive there, you shouldn't have to like do anything else. If it's magic and it's supposed to get you where you say you're going, you should just fucking arrive there. I mean, even if you do have to go through like this weird like wormhole of networky magic stuff, which is like kind of crazy and interesting too. Because unlike apparating, where it's like you just sort of like compress, disappear, and reappear, although that looks different in the movies, but in the books, that's what happens. But with the Floo network, it's like you're like literally in some sort of like strange little magic wormhole where like fireplaces are like whizzing by you, and then you somehow magically on purpose get out of the right one. It's like it guides you to it, but you have to actually like do it or something. I don't know. Anyway, but of course Harry coughs and doesn't pronounce Diagon Alley clearly, and so somehow through the magic of plot devices, Harry lands in an alley that's not far from Diagon Alley, but he doesn't know that right away. So he comes out somewhere, he, lands face first on something, on a hard floor, he cracks his glasses, and then he's in this place, he doesn't know where he is, he's alone, and he recognizes it as a dimly lit wizard shop, but he has no idea where it is. And it doesn't look like a kind of place that you would be able to get anything from your Hogwarts school list. And there's descriptions of some of the things. There's a withered hand on a cushion, which turns out to be the hand of glory that Malfoy gets later. Bloodstained pack of cards, staring glass eyes, evil-looking masks that are leering. an assortment of human bones, all kinds of stuff. And then Harry finally catches a glimpse of the street outside, and he knows that it's not Diagon Alley. So he wants to leave, but then as he started getting towards the door, he sees on the other side of the glass two people, a man and a child, and that child happens to be none other than dun 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 Harry's arch nemesis, Draco Malfoy. Which, by the way, one of the weird things that Stephen Fry does, and it's like such a strange thing because he doesn't really do this much in the series. For some reason, he pronounces the last name Malfoy sometimes, and other times Malfoy. And to me, it's Malfoy, but it's like and it seems like the further we go into the book, or books, he says Malfoy less and Malfoy more, but like earlier on, it seems to kind of, he goes back and forth. Like to the point where I was like trying to figure out if it had to do with like what part of the sentence it's in, but it doesn't seem to. It seems to be that eventually he evens it out, and it's just Malfoy. But whatever, just saying. I'm not even saying that that's correct. That's just what I'm used to hearing, and it's interesting that it seems like that's what he changes it to, and I think that's how they say it in the movies too. So that, I don't know. Right. So yeah. Anyway, obviously Harry doesn't want to run into Malfoy and his father, so he sees a cabinet that, spoiler alert, comes back into the series later. We'll not worry about that just now. And so Harry gets in the cabinet and pulls the doors closed enough to where nobody can see him, and just leaves a little crack to stare out. And so, yeah, Mr. Malfoy, Draco's father, and Draco both come in. And Malfoy, we find out, is kind of whiny around his dad when there's nobody else around. He's like, I thought you were going to buy me a present, because he wants this, he sees that hand. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Not then, he didn't. First he sees the glass eye. The hand's coming up. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And it's mentioned that Mr. Malfoy is planning to buy him a racing broom. And he's like, what good is that if I'm not on the house team? And he gets into... and he starts complaining about Harry being on the Gryffindor team because he's famous Harry Potter, and he's got a scar on his forehead. Wonderful Potter with his scar and his broomstick. That's actually more like a Malfoy voice, kind of ish. Mr. Malfoy's like, yeah, I've heard this like a dozen times already. You could knock it off about the whole Harry thing, which is great because Harry's hearing this and he realizes that Malfoy's been like complaining this whole summer, which has got to give him a certain measure of satisfaction to know that Malfoy whines. Even if Harry doesn't care about being famous or any of that stuff, it's just got to be nice to know that it gets under Malfoy's skin. Even again, if it's not the thing he would want him to feel that way about, but whatever. Oh, right, and Mr. Malfoy warns Draco that it's not prudent to be seen as not liking Harry because he's, kind of the hero, as it were, which, of course, is also kind of unfair because, Harry didn't do anything. He was a baby, and he doesn't feel like he's a hero at all. He just didn't die. He's the boy who lived, but he doesn't really know why he lived, and he knows he didn't do anything because he was a baby. So anyway, yeah. And so Mr. Borgin of Borgin and Burkes, which is the name of this shop we will learn, finally appears, and we find out that Mr. Malfoy is not there to buy anything at all. He is there to sell some things. Turns out he has some dark artifacts at his house, and there have been raids being conducted recently by the Ministry of Magic, and Malfoy wants to make sure that the things he's got, which there are a few apparently, that he doesn't, they're not found in his house, because he doesn't want to get busted. Because Malfoy, Lucius, that is, the father, well, he was a Death Eater, and I think that's mentioned in the first book anyway, so that's not really a spoiler, but he's one of those Death Eaters that renounced the Dark Lord, Voldemort, after he was vanquished, and so he pretended to like have been under a spell or whatever. Basically, he came back to his right mind, and he came over to the good side, so to speak. But clearly the way he carries himself and the way he treats certain people, that's not exactly what's going on. But anyway, nonetheless, he doesn't want to get in any kind of legal trouble. So he's he didn't bring anything with him. He's arranging pickup. So basically he's going to have Borgin come so that way he couldn't even be called out of the house with the things. He's going to make Borgin come buy them from him, and then take them and basically take the risk on himself. And maybe because he's a dealer, he wouldn't be in trouble, maybe, who knows. But either way, he's convinced him. All that I did just from remembering the thing, the audio book chapter. So now I'm checking to make sure I know where I am. Oh, and Malfoy and Burke are kind of, Borgin are going back and forth a little bit, talking, and there's a mention of a rumored Muggle Protection Act, and Malfoy has not so nice things to say about Arthur Weasley being behind it, and Harry gets angry, of course, because, Harry. Yeah, I mean, because, that's just like best friend's dad, and he likes Mr. Weasley, and so to hear somebody talk like that about him pisses him off. And so anyway, and then Draco's moved on to the withered hand on the cushion, the hand of glory, which is then described by Mr. Borgin as being, you insert a candle in the hand, and then it gives light only to the holder. Best friend of thieves and plunderers. Blah, blah, blah. Mr. Malfoy makes reference to how he hopes his son is more than just a thief or a plunderer, but that he also has not such good grades. And Draco says it's not my fault, and the teachers all have favorites like Hermione Granger. Blah, 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 blah. Mention of wizarding blood, and that not counting for as much as it used to, is what Mr. Borgin says, and Malfoy says, not with me. And they do their whole, pure blood thing. Of course, it's doubtful that Borgin's pure blood, but whatever. And Harry sees Draco moving around the room, looking at other stuff, and he's getting closer to where Harry's hiding. And and another foreshadowing bit. We see Draco sees a where did it go? I'm blind. Oh, a necklace of opals, and the sign next to it that says "Do not touch. It's cursed. Has claimed the lives of 19 Muggle owners to date." And that's the necklace that Malfoy is going to use later to try and kill. Well, okay, we'll hold off, but to try and kill someone, for sure. And then Draco turns away and he sees the cabinet that Harry is in, and he starts walking towards it, and of course he stretches out his hand, and right as he's about to open it, that's when Mr. Malfoy finishes and says, "Come, Draco," and they go. And so blah 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 blah. And Borgin mutters that if the stories are true, that Malfoy's not selling half of what he's actually got in his manor, so he's got other things hidden, apparently. And so Mr. Borgin disappears into a back room, and Harry waits, and then he gets out, and finally is able to leave the shop. And he's keeping his broken glasses pressed to his face as he tries to figure out where the hell to go, and he's walking and blah blah blah. He finally sees that the shop is actually called Borgin and Burkes, because he's outside now and he can see the sign. And so he sees all kinds of other shops that are like dodgy and kind of, not anything that Harry would actually be interested in. Shop selling poisonous candles. And then he sees a street sign that lets him know he's in Nocturne Alley, which of course doesn't help because Harry has no idea where Nocturne Alley is. Blah blah blah. He's stumbling around. Somebody's like, "You're not lost, are you?" And whatever. And he's like, "Nope, I'm good." And then right as he's like trying to get away from that person, he runs into Hagrid. "Harry, what do you think you're doing down there?" That wasn't very good, but whatever. And so Harry's like, "Oh, thank God. Fuck. Know what the hell I was gonna do, but there's Hagrid." And so it's all good. Anyway, and of course Hagrid being Hagrid's like, "What are you doing down here? Dodgy place, Harry. Don't want to see you down there." Apparently I just feel like trying bad Hagrid voices today. That's what happens sometimes. Anyway, and Harry's like, I didn't want to be here. I told you I got lost, dude. Fuck. Just help me. And he's like, "By the way, what are you doing down here?" And of course Hagrid actually has a reason. He's buying flesh-eating slug repellent, which, sounds great. Because, the school cabbages need repellent. And he has to explain to Hagrid that he's with the Weasleys, but they got separated, blah, 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 blah. And so then Hagrid's like, "Why didn't you write me back?" And Harry's like, "I gotta run to keep up with you, but, and he explains about Dobby and the Dursleys and all of that nonsense, and then they run into Hermione, who's arrived but hasn't quite met with the Weasleys yet, but they're about to show up, and they do. And so we also see that Hermione's got her parents there, which raises that question. And I feel like I've seen that recently. Somebody talked about it somewhere. Anyway, like, is it normal for Muggle parents of Muggleborns to be able to get into Diagon Alley? Is it something that she just didn't think about when she placed the Grangers there? Or do they? I don't know. You never hear ever again about a Muggle family being in Diagon Alley, but there they are. There the Grangers are. Which, by the way, Diagon Alley is not. I mean, it is a place, but like, Shouldn't the thing they said when they got into the fire be like the leaky cauldron? Just thought about that. Like, what is the generic fire for Diagon Alley? Is there a fire in the middle of the street somewhere? There's not, right? I guess maybe it's just accepted that the leaky cauldron is the entrance to Diagon Alley, no matter where you're coming from. I guess so. Always a question with you, huh? And so yeah, Harry's like, I ended up in Nocturne Alley, and Fred and George are like, brilliant. Mrs. Weasley's been all worried. She's kind of having to, get over it. You could have been anywhere. Oh, and Mr. Weasley fixes Harry's glasses. I kind of missed that the first time for some reason. I mean, I'm sure I've recognized it other times, but just today, I mean. Anyway, so Hagrid's like, yep, gotta go. See you later. And it's weird because I've always thought this was kind of an abrupt leaving for Hagrid. Hagrid's usually, a bit more on the sentimental side to a certain degree, especially when Harry's concerned. And instead of being like, all right, guys, it's good to see you at the beginning of term, blah, 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 peace out. He's like, all right, gotta go. All right, see you at Hogwarts. Which actually isn't the last time he's going to see them in this chapter. But that's what he says, which is, one of those things. And then Harry gets into telling Ron and Hermione about seeing Draco and his father there, and Mr. Weasley overhears him, and he's like, did he buy anything? And Harry's like, nope, he was selling. And Mr. Weasley's like, ha. So he's worried, is he? And we find out basically that there's an enmity there, that Mr. Weasley is not a fan of Lucius Malfoy. And Mrs. Weasley's like, don't get yourself into trouble. Don't bite off more than you can chew. And so we get a little bit of that boyish competitiveness from Mr. Weasley, even though he's just like the father of 7 kids. He's like, so you don't think I'm a match for Lucius Malfoy, huh? And that was totally the voice he used, and the inflection and everything. It was. And so then Mr. Weasley's like, oh, I'm being an idiot. There's the Grangers. And they're like, oh, but you're muggles. We have to go have a drink. And so, subject changed. And so, and Mr. Weasley's fascinated by them changing their muggle money. Again, so, like, that makes it sound like that's something you can do. But we never hear about any other muggles in Diagon Alley. I don't know. Somebody knows the answer to this, and they're going to comment and tell me. I just don't know it. And I could have Googled it, but I didn't. So, thanks in advance. And so they go to Gringotts, and we have more uncomfortable moments where Harry has to deal with his wealth versus the Weasleys' general poorness relative to his. And they go to their vault, and there's like hardly anything in there. There's only one galleon, and Mrs. Weasley grabs everything out. And Harry's like, oh, fuck. And then they get to Harry's vault, and it's more like, oh, fuck, because he can't even hide what he's got in his. It's so mounded full of gold and silver and mounded. That's totally not how you would say that. But you know what I meant, and that's the good part. Anyway, and so he just kind of like scoops some fucking money into his pouch and it's like, let's get the hell out of here, because he's like doesn't want them to be like staring at all of his money when they hardly have anything, and it's just really, really awkward, and he doesn't really know what else to do. So anyway, nobody says anything, of course, because they're decent people and they don't really care. And so then they sort of split up after they get outside of Gringotts, and Percy goes to go do his Percy thing, and Fred and George see Lee Jordan, their homie from their year, so they're off with him. And Mrs. Weasley and Ginny are going to go to a secondhand road shop. That's right, I'm giving you the full rundown. And Mr. Weasley's taking the Grangers, and so that leaves Harry, Ron, and Hermione to do their thing. And so they've got like a little plan now, and everybody's going to go do their thing, and then everybody's going to meet back up at Flourish and Blotts in an hour, which is the bookshop. Because, of course, a place called Flourish and Blotts is the bookshop. Because, of course, it is, right? I just said that. Okay, great. Because, of course, it is. And Harry's like, oh, I got money. Now he's like, wants to spend his money. Not again. He's got it and he wants to spend it. You can't blame him. I'm all defending Harry. And of course, he buys 3 big ice creams. So again, not stingy with the money, that Harry. But he doesn't buy everybody everything either, which is smart. He doesn't try to win his friends over, just by buying them stuff. Because Ron's gazing at these Quidditch robes and quality Quidditch supplies. And so then they go to the joke shop, which is interesting. So right now Diagon Alley has a joke shop, Gamble and Japes, which I don't think is ever mentioned again, because we do get Zonkos, but that's in Hogsmeade. But later when Fred and George open their own shop, it kind of sounds like they're the only game in town. Of course, by that point, other shops have been shut down too. Things are kind of shitty. Well, no, wait, that's before Voldemort comes out into the open. So it's whatever. Nonetheless, some of the joke products that are mentioned for the first time are mentioned here. Dr. Filibuster's fabulous wet start, no heat fireworks, which definitely come into play later. And in another random shop, they find Percy reading a book that's called Prefects Who Gained Power. And Ron gives Percy some shit about it, and Percy's like, yeah, go away. And it's mentioned here by Ron that Percy is ambitious and that he wants to be a minister of magic. And of course, Percy does kind of. He never actually gets to that point, but he's definitely angling for power in the ministry later when he leaves Hogwarts and goes to work. So this is like a little foreshadowing of that, a little background. So anyway, then we speed ahead to the end of that hour, and they're at Flourish and Blotts. And there's lots of people coming in, and there's a crowd jostling outside the doors. And we see that the reason why there's such a crowd is that there's a sign that says that Gilderoy Lockhart will be signing copies of his autobiography, Magical Me, today, 12:30 to 4:30. And so... And we get this whole, we're playing up this whole thing about how Lockhart is apparently attractive because even Hermione, who's not exactly the gushy kind of person, is like, we could actually meet him. And yes, she says he's written the whole book list, and yeah, that's a factor, but, let's face it. there's more to it than that, because Mrs. Weasley is really into him too, and it's not because he knows his household charms. Anyway, and then we find out that like a lot of the crowd seems to be made up of witches around Mrs. Weasley's age. So we kind of confirming that theory that Mr. Lockhart here is a dashing man. Anyway, and of course, you know, with books having moving pictures, you know, like not only is he attractive, but that means he's like, every time you look at one of his, like his picture on the back or front of his book, he's like giving you his most winning smile and, you know, flashing his eyes at you and stuff like that. So yeah. And so the Weasleys are in there, and they finally see Lockhart, and he's seated at a table surrounded by large pictures of his own face. So not only do we find out that Lockhart is attractive, we also are simultaneously being fed the message that Lockhart is very much aware of that fact and quite full of himself, as it turns out. American quite, as in very full of himself. There's a short, irritable man taking photographs, and find out that he works for the Daily Prophet. We find out that Ron doesn't care. But Lockhart overhears like a little bit of the kerfuffle or whatever between the photographer and saying that he works for the Daily Prophet and Ron. And Lockhart looks up and he sees Ron, but then he pans over and he sees Harry, and immediately like raises his voice like, "It can't be Harry Potter!" And so yeah, and then Lockhart comes out from behind his table and he grabs Harry by the arm and he pulls him to the front, and there's applause, and Harry's just like really like uncomfortable and he's blushing, and he's like, and Lockhart's shaking his hand for the photographer, and Harry's just like, this fucking sucks. And nice big smile, Harry. Yeah, Lockhart's just like big time cheeseball, and but also he's like very PR minded and just promotions minded. He's like, together you and I are worth the front page. Let's see, I'll try not to quote all of Lockhart's lines because that's annoying. Anyway, so yeah, he you know, waves everyone to be quiet, and he makes this big announcement. And again, I'm not going to quote all of the Lockhart stuff, but basically he tells everybody that not only are they, you know, getting his books, they're getting him. That's right. He's going to be teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts this year. And everybody claps and cheers, and Harry's like, oh, great. But Lockhart gives him, or has somebody give him, an entire the whole list of books that he has for school. They're giving him to him for free in addition to this fucking autobiography. So Harry just got all his school books for free, the one person who can afford them. But Harry being Harry, after he gets away from all this attention, which he didn't want in the first place, he finds Jenny, and he's tips all the books into her cauldron that she just got. And he's like, here, you take these. I'll get my own. And right as that happens, Draco on cue shows up, and he's like, I bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter? And it's interesting, like, I don't know, I would expect Malfoy to go for more of like an angle of like I don't know, making fun of somebody for being famous is kind of like counterintuitive to me, I guess. I mean, not that fame is everything by any stretch of the imagination, but the point is that obviously Malfoy would love to have a reason to be famous. He clearly seeks attention. Maybe making fun of somebody for, like, you know, well, I mean, none of the things that he would choose would be actually honorable or good things. You shouldn't be making fun of people anyway. But if you're gonna have to go that route, like, there's just other like his you know, Muggle upbringing or I don't know, other things. But I've always thought that it was kind of strange. I mean, obviously he resents it, but it just seems like he tries to use it against him, and I mean, I know Harry doesn't like it, but that's not what it's whatever. And so and Ginny stands up for him. She's like, leave him alone. He didn't want that. And all that type of thing. And which is it's the first time that Harry's actually heard her speak out. And when he was around at all. Because she's been basically quiet and just knocking shit over. But that pissed her off. And then suddenly she lashed out a little bit. So we see the fiery Ginny poking her head out. And so we know she's there early on, actually. So good. I'd forgotten. And Malfoy calls Ginny his girlfriend. Because, yeah, Malfoy is super mature. And Ron shows up and he's like, oh, it's you. Because that's one of the things I do love, too, is that even though Ron knows that he doesn't have, like, money and stuff like Malfoy and them, and it bugs him in certain situations, he's also, like, he looks at Malfoy like he's a piece of shit anyway. Like, he doesn't, like, he's not intimidated by him. Which I kind of love, because he could be. It wouldn't be entirely outside of his character, but he's like, psst, whatever. Oh, and he's like, I bet you're surprised to see Harry here. And I just realized, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but it's because Ron thinks that Malfoy sent Dobby. And, I mean, I guess they all do at this point. As a joke, so he didn't think Harry would actually come. And so, of course, Malfoy has no idea what that means, but he doesn't say so. He's just like, instead he decides to insult Ron for being in a shop because he can't imagine that his family can afford to buy him anything, basically. And now Ron's pissed off because he's touched on that subject. Because it's one thing if it's not spoken, but when it is spoken, then, like, Ron gets, red-eared and whatnot. And Ron starts towards Malfoy, but Harry and Hermione grab him, and then Mr. Weasley comes in, like, what are you doing? It's mad in here. And then, before Mr. Weasley can get them all herded out of the shop, then Lucius Malfoy shows up. And so now we have the same enmity between Harry and Ron and Draco now entering in the form of Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy. And Malfoy says all kinds of little sly shit and tries to, provoke. They are really the provokers, these Malfoys, I tell you. So they kind of snipe back and forth a little bit about disgracing the name of wizard and blah blah blah. Oh, and Mr. Malfoy sees the Grangers with them, and I guess he somehow recognizes them as Muggles, probably because of how they're dressed. And he's like, the company you keep, Weasley. And he's like, I thought your family could sink no lower. And of course, those are the kind of provocations that always work against them. And so now Mr. Weasley dives after Malfoy, just like Ron was going after Draco, and he knocks him into the bookshelf, and dozens of books fall, and of course one of the twins is like, "Get him, Dad," because of course they're gonna, because fuck the Malfoys basically, especially at this point in the story. And of course, Mrs. Weasley is freaking out, and she's yelling at Mr. Weasley, and the assistant of the store is trying to stop him. And then, out of nowhere, Hagrid's back, and he's like, "Break it up, Dad, break it up." And so, how the fuck did Hagrid end up back in that area? And obviously he wasn't coming into Flourish and Blotts, otherwise he must have seen the commotion and come in, but he was leaving, and he ain't gone. What happened? Was Hagrid tailing them from a distance? Hagrid can't tail anybody, he's too big. Just wondering. Anyway. And so anyway, they get separated by Hagrid, and Mr. Malfoy had been holding one of Ginny's books, her Transfiguration book, and he throws it back at her, and they leave. But it's important to note that that book was handed back, because something happened there. Which we'll get to later. And like everybody always says in these books, when somebody gets pissed off, somebody else has got a cooler head in the moment. Like Hagrid's always cool-headed. He's like, "You should have just ignored him, Arthur." Because, again, it's not like Hagrid can't be provoked, except, yeah, he totally can. And so, and Hagrid mentions that their family's all rotten and bad blood, and so that's more of that mention of blood. So anyway, they get out of there, and Mrs. Weasley's going at Mr. Weasley about fighting, and what kind of an example that sets in front of the children, and what Lockhart must have thought. But of course, Fred mentions that Lockhart, being the publicity whore that he is like, oh, he was pleased. He was trying to see if the Daily Prophet guy could work it into his story, or report, as they say here, because they're British. So anyway, after all that kerfuffle, they're all kind of subdued, and they head back to the Leaky Cauldron, and everybody's getting ready to go back where they're going, and they say goodbye to the Grangers, who they're kind of probably embarrassed now to have had them witness that. But in Mr. Weasley's defense, Malfoy had just kind of insulted all of them, including the Grangers, so hopefully they at least... And that it's one of those weird things, like the Grangers occupy like this weird space in this chapter because they're there, but we never get a single line of dialogue from either of them. And they're really... this is the only time that we even see them at all, and they're not described, they're just nameless, faceless parents of Hermione. And I will say one thing, in the books, Hermione only alludes to it, but in the movies, for the last, I can't remember if it was Deathly Hallows Part 1 or Part 2, but in one of the later movies from the last book, we see Hermione putting the memory charm on her parents, which basically makes them forget that they have a daughter and they have different names, and it's really kind of a heartbreaking thing to have done. She can reverse it, but that's what she does when she leaves home. And we never did, even then it's like they're basically don't really, I don't even know if they have any dialogue in that scene, but we see them at least. We have like that brief moment of seeing Hermione's like inner torment at having to do what she knows she has to do in that moment. But in the books, like, she just mentions it. I mean, and she's upset about it, but she's only talking about it. And so, yeah, this is our only glimpse of them, but there's not really much of a glimpse other than to know that there's a man and a woman, and they're the mother and father of Hermione. Anyway, righto. Right, and so they say goodbye to them. Mr. Weasley wants to ask him about how bus stops work, but Mrs. Weasley gives him a look and he shuts up. And this time they're getting ready to use Floo powder again to leave. So I guess the answer is yes, they come to the Leaky Cauldron because they're going to leave via the Leaky Cauldron here. And Harry puts his glasses away safely, and he gets some Floo powder, and it's mentioned that it's definitely not his favorite way to travel. And that is how that chapter ends. We're 4 down. I know we're moving slowly, but we're 4 down in the Chamber of Secrets. Up next, the Whomping Willow. Yeah, I think that's all we got to say about that. We got some Floo powder, we got some Lockhart, we got some pure blood, pure blood and Muggle loving pure blood tension. And now we're about to be off to Hogwarts. So yeah, that is that. Thank you for listening. As always, your little comments, and by little I don't mean anything degrading. I just mean that they're cute. That's not what I mean at all. I just shouldn't have used the word. I like your comments. That's what I'm trying to fucking say. Okay, Jesus. Yeah, that's really it. I appreciate you all who do listen, and I hope you'll join me next time. I watched a couple of game shows tonight, and I think that's why I'm like, hey, right. I'm dragging this out. Have a lovely day, morning, night, evening, wherever you're at, and we'll see you next time. Peace.